Now that might sound a bit strange, but let me explain. There are many examples in the world where granting rights to minorities, including the right to education in their own language, this has been shown to be effective to maintain unity. There might have been a separatist movement previously, but by guaranteeing the rights of minorities, the government is showing that it recognizes the reality in the country, that you have a minority that uses other languages, that they are citizens, they're a part of the national identity, national composition of the country, and therefore when you embrace and accept this reality, and you actually put something in place that recognizes and respects this reality, then minorities feel that it is their country also better. And there are examples in Canada even. Canada became officially bilingual only in the 1960s to address the separatist movement in Quebec. And one of the important initiatives at that point was to guarantee the right of the French-speaking minority also outside of Quebec to education in their own language, where it was possible to do that.
At these regional forums, the participants shared examples of good practices. They showed how the rights of linguistic minorities may be implemented in different ways in different contexts.
Donc je vous laisse voir ce manuel scolaire de l'Institut royal de la culture amazigh. Voilà, c'est un exemple. Donc, les manuels scolaires, il fallait aussi élaborer les dictionnaires spécialisés, parce que vous savez, les langues orales, ils sont riches dans des domaines, mais pauvres dans d'autres domaines.
Having this regional forum on minority issues in Tunisia is a good opportunity for all minorities, religious, linguistic and ethnic minorities, since the minority issue is not so highlighted in Tunisia. For me as Amazigh, and I belong to a linguistic minority and indigenous people at the same time, the theme of this forum, which is education, is so important for us, since there is no recognition of the language as a Tamazight language.
So can you please explain exactly what is the importance of language for the Amazigh community, for the Amazigh minority?
In Tunisia, the majority of people who identify themselves as Amazigh did not speak language, and if you compare with, if we see or found other Amazigh from Algeria and Morocco or Libya, they ask, you are Amazigh and why you did not speak the language, so you are not Amazigh.
Donc il est très important pour les enfants, les petits-enfants aujourd'hui, de connaître ou de parler cette langue dite maternelle qui n'est ni écrite ni sauvegardée. Je parle des Amazighs ici en Tunisie, pour une identité qui est plurielle mais qui existe, c'est pour leur propre identité. C'est très important de rendre ce qui est immatériel matériel aujourd'hui. Que ce soit la langue, que ce soit le chant, que ce soit le théâtre, que ce soit toutes ces traditions devraient être au moins inscrites et ne pas rester dans l'immatériel.
Remember, language is central to human identity. We are language animals in a sense. And so therefore, what people tend to forget sometimes, but what I've heard quite often in all three forums, is that people want their language to be not only maintained, but to flourish as much as possible. Quite often even there's perhaps a misunderstanding that you should only learn a major language and forget about your own if it's a minority language. But I think what more and more I've heard is that people really have a link to their history, their identity, their heritage really, and they want to maintain that. They're not quite sure how to do it. And now we've had some recommendations, we've had reflections also. We've been thinking about it with these forums. And what we have found, I think, is a kind of recommendations that provide a recipe appropriate for different contexts on how this can be done in respect of human rights and in respect of our linguistic diversity, which is the reality of human diversity also, of humanity.
Some states claim that mother tongue education can be a problem for learning the official language. But is this the case?
those minorities who can study, live in their languages, in their own culture, will make for loyal citizens of the state, since they will have the foundations to study the language of the majority, not only the cognitive foundations, but also the motivation to be loyal citizens of a cohesive society. For a European, it was extremely interesting to see that in Asia you had much more complex analytical frameworks, much vaster research available to learn from, and in general you had an enormous diversity of various minority languages within a state. In Europe, you always say, oh yeah, there are 13, 15, maybe 18 minorities at most. You go to India, you go to Thailand. Excuse me, how many minorities you have? How many languages do you have to deal with? And because these states haven't had persistent and consistent assimilationist policies, you see that languages survived, at least locally. So there's hope that via adequate public policies, this diversity will survive for the benefit of all, for the benefit of humanity. So in general, what we saw, that there was a strong agreement that minorities need to learn the language of the majority. It is the minorities who are multilingual.
At all the regional forums, the participants presented their recommendations on what needs to be done to ensure the linguistic rights in education.
The forum we have in Geneva is a huge success, but we hear relatively few voices, especially from Africa and the Middle East. And so this is an opportunity for giving the voice, the possibility of presenting recommendations on the theme of the different thematic priorities to more and more minority groups around the world. And in all three of those counts, as a matter of fact, we've been successful, frankly, with these three regional forums, and I'm quite pleased with the results here in Africa, in Tunis. The next step is that it is hoped in 2020 we will be able to have a drafting committee or group of experts working on preparing specific guidelines and a practical guide, if you will, on what are the human rights minorities in the area of education in relation to their language. So this is intended for governments, for civil society also, people who work in the area of the rights of minorities, minority organizations, and the general public, to actually raise awareness of what we mean by the human rights of minorities in education and language, how this is to be implemented, and specific guidance really for governments on what their obligations are and indications of good practices in how to implement that.
For many, music is a way of both using and expressing their mother tongue.
J'utilise la langue berbère dans mes chansons car je trouve la musique le moyen le plus facile pour comprendre ma langue, car quand j'étais enfant, je ne comprends pas. Alors la musique, elle aide moi pour comprendre ma langue.
يدممني مكثر شكت ساينو أنا